This is Keith Helwig, Cops Corrections Videos. If you like my videos, please subscribe. The big news lately in the corrections world and in law enforcement in general has been the Jeffrey Epstein suicide. I'd like to take just a couple minutes to discuss that. As someone who's worked both sides of the fence as a street officer and as a correctional officer for 40 years now, I can't begin to tell you the number of times I've seen people try to kill themselves and actually succeed in killing themselves. I've had men cut their throats as I watched. I've had men jump off a top tier as I watched. I've had people manually try to strangle themselves with a pair of knotted underwear while I watched. Not all of these were successful. Some were, unfortunately. The point is, I was there when it was happening, and there was nothing I could do to stop it at that point in time. Back when we didn't have OC or anything else as a deterrent, and things like that happened. Now, the situation with Jeffrey Epstein, pardon me, this was a very high-profile inmate. This is an inmate that should have been on constant 24-hour observation, not because he was crazy or whatever, but because he was a high-profile inmate. I know that any time an inmate like that came into the facility I worked, for at least the first 2 weeks, they were placed in high observation status. That meant we had a staff member check on them at least every 15 minutes. Now, somebody like Epstein, who is determined to kill themselves, they're going to do it. People don't realize how fast you can take your own life. It only takes a matter of a minute. The last hanging that I had to deal with in the prison was a 19-year-old man. This 19-year-old man had gone into somebody's house while they were talking on the phone and stabbed them simply for no reason whatsoever. He came into prison, he was assigned a roommate, and one night I was working as third shift captain. One of my sergeants found him hanging in a cell. Well, he was in the cell with his roommate. His roommate said that he got up in the middle of the night and bumped into the body and all this kind of stuff. Well, you know what? This young man wanted to kill himself. He was going to kill himself regardless. The tragic fact of this one was that his cellmate helped him kill himself. His cellmate's DNA was found on the noose because he showed him how to make one out of a sheet. Now, he hung himself from the top bunk in his cell. I've seen people hang themselves from the lower bunk on the bottom of their cell. Now, I'm not going to go into details how it's done because I'm not here to give a suicide for dummies speech, but it can happen. Anyways, that man said, after some questioning by myself and the county detective, that basically he convinced this young man to kill himself while he watched because he wanted to see what it was like to see someone die. For that, he received a grand total of an extra 6 years in prison. Now back to the Epstein suicide. This man knew he was facing life in prison. This man knew that his lifestyle was over. You know, I can't imagine what it is to live the lifestyle of a billionaire. I wish I could. But I can't imagine what that would be to lose all of your freedom, to lose absolutely everything. Now, he deserved it. The man was a Class A pervert. He was someone who deserved to spend the rest of his life in prison. As far as I'm concerned, when someone's a serial pedophile like that, I wouldn't rule out capital punishment. But the fact is, he killed himself, and people are going to hang for it. Now, one of the reasons he killed himself, I attribute to general complacency. The complacency of the administration at the prison. He was on suicide watch once. He was a high-profile inmate. He was someone they knew was a danger, whether it was from other inmates or whether it was from himself. He is someone who should have been watched closely and monitored closely at all times. Then, when I read in the paper that the two officers that were working there were both working overtime, they'd work extended hours, and they were sleeping. I worked in the prison system for over 36 years. I never once slept. I spent 3 years on third shift, and third shift where I was working was god-awful boring. I never slept. If you're an officer, whether it's a police officer, whether it's a correctional officer, a security officer, or whatever, you have responsibilities. And if you become so complacent that you don't fulfill those responsibilities and something like this happens, whose fault is it? Can you say it's management's fault because they didn't hire enough people and I was tired and blah, blah, blah? No, the fact is, it's your fault. It's your fault for being complacent. Now, you can't be blamed for the death itself. That was his choice. That was something that he did of his own accord. But as officers, we always need to remain vigilant. We need to remain alert. We need to remain aware of our surroundings. Complacency kills, not just us, but inmates as well. Until next time, this is Keith Helwig. Watch your back and stay safe.